Welcome everybody to Cameron's Corner. Today I wanted to focus on ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance. My newsfeed is constantly bombarded with ESG, press releases coming out with ESG statements from our clients, our operators, how we fit into it. So I really wanted to do a little bit of research on what is actually ESG, and it's all encompassing, grade, complexity, but then also try to share that information of my research with everyone here. So I wanted to get started with environmental, social, and governance. Investing is rapidly becoming one of the most visible and durable mega trends in the oil and gas industry. As momentum builds behind efforts to promote renewable energy, sustainability, energy transition, the pressure of ESG is being felt throughout the U.S. oil and gas industry. Now, the value chain, especially in the upstream sector, is facing the most scrutiny for its impacts on the environment, methane emissions, how it's looking in a cornfield. You got these big drilling rigs going on, but also in the midstream for its social impact and governance structure. So I started trying to figure out, looking at all these news feeds of, okay, what is ESG? Now, the term environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, was first coined in 2004 in a study by the UN Global Compact entitled Who Cares Wins. Now, with the continuous push for climate change and renewable technology, ESG pushes into the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas companies have put out their ESG statements to show that they have a future viability and that they're conducting operations in the right way, which makes sense. If you got a lot of scrutiny, all these companies are looking at, no, don't just look at our P&L and balance statement, but also look at how we are as a company, our culture, what are we doing, how are we protecting the environment and the communities that we work in. So the ESG being coined in 2004, now there was some social governance in the 60s and 70s, but ESG really started picking up pace in 2004. So to assess a company's based on environmental, social, and governance, investors look at a broad range of behaviors for these companies. And I'm seeing from their press releases how they're regarding few things and how they're being specifically calling out certain initiatives or dashboard metrics that they're looking at. So let's first look at social. Now on social, they're focused on employee safety. Number one, has to happen, as well as giving back to communities that they're working in. Absolutely, you got to take care of the place, and it's got to be in better shape than when you first got there. This one area again where I think there's a big gap in negative public perception is oil and gas industries and communities, how they just ravage the landscape and leave. Now all the clients that we deal with, the operators that I know, they spend a ton of time making sure that it's properly cleaned up, that it's excavated properly if there's any spills, how they're treating for it, recycling the area, and then even replanting back up so to stop erosion on the locations itself. Now, but the company's business relationships is another area. Now, this falls under social, which makes perfect sense. Does it work with suppliers that hold the same values as the claims they hold? You can no longer say that your contractors and subcontractors, well, that's how they do it. Won't work that way. You hired them. Are they holding up to the same regard of social and environmental governance as you do? So does the company donate a percentage of its profits to the local community or encourage employees to perform volunteer work there? Do the company's working conditions show high regard for its employees' safety and health? Are the stakeholders' interests taken into account? So these are all of things that I'm starting to see in these press releases that I started kind of combing through, highlighting, and I was like, these are good points. But it's showing common denominator of, it seems to be, this is what's being tracked also and reviewed, their behaviors. Now on the environmental side, from my research, there's some common denominators. Major areas of focus from my research include like eliminating flaring, reducing methane emissions, monitoring those methane emissions, because it's not just about saying, well, we reduce it by 22% methane emissions. How do you prove that? So proper monitoring as well seems to be actually in a lot of these ESG statements. So for even smaller companies though, I'm starting to see some ESG statements, but even like EPA putting out some papers of how to help reduce and make sure we get within compliance. So they're talking about relatively cost-efficient things because these are smaller operators, like replacing valves with newer technology, replacing antiquated older equipment that is being run down, degraded. They're also looking at water usage, considering the volumes produced and what percentage of what is actually being recycled. So efficiency gains, I mean, if you have methane reduction, that means that you're actually processing it properly and selling it. So there is some economic incentive there, but it seems to be this is a dashboard metric that investors are actually looking at as well. Environmental criteria. So on some of them, I'm even looking at where they have energy use, their waste, pollution, natural resource conservation. Some of them even showed like treatment of animals. How are they properly taking care of the animals on location? The criteria can also be used in evaluating any environmental risks a company might face down the road. So it's kind of neat when you're looking at these metrics, if they're addressing them, kind of like what Deming said about properly monitoring a metric, because if you're not measuring something, then you're not monitoring it. So the fact that they're actually monitoring that these things are actually getting into place, it's showing to their investors, look, we have viability, we're managing the risks, we have known risks that we are now properly taking care of. So I can kind of see where they're going at with a lot of this, and I can see why, as an investor, I'm not just looking at their bottom line P&L. You know, I'm also looking at unknown variable risks out there, and how are they going to take care of that. So ESG-minded business practices gain more traction. Investment firms are going to be looking at it continuously. So people like J.P. Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, they're publishing annual reports that extensively review their ESG approaches rather than just bottom line results. So I do believe that this is going to get traction. This is going to be a long-term event. And then because bottom line is wherever the money goes, that's where everyone else is going to go. So that's where our companies are going to adapt, operators are going to adapt, individuals are going to adapt. But in doing this research, because that's what it all turn back to circle, is how does Croft fit into this ESG initiative in this world that we're now transitioning into. So we started gotten with business developers and our engineers and started listing out of, you know, how can it help. And the big things that we have is like consulting with our clients, our engineers, helping with the operators, showing best solutions for processing natural gas. That way, reducing methane emissions, monitoring yourself, properly tracking, and just doing it the right way. One of them, the key big things, is our passive dehydration system. It's a natural gas solid desiccant dehydrator that can be on wildlife refuges, but it relies no burners, no moving parts during its normal operation. So that's actually taking into big effect right now. A lot of people are adopting it and finally coming into the conclusion of there's a better way than just triethylene glycol or glycol systems. There is glycol systems out there that work in great scenarios, burners, amine plants. So what we try to do is upgrading those systems into better burner management systems, zero or low bleed instrumentation and monitoring. And there's quite a few other things. I'm not going to go into those right now. You can go to our website and see more that how we can help you. The biggest thing that you have is the important thing to do in 2021 is, if you haven't already, just get started. First step, just get started, be proactive, address the ESG issues within your company, of your location, of your project, and then just start setting a broad strategy and then tactical milestones of how to hit those initiatives. Now, if there's any questions about this, if you need any help from Croft staff, please reach out to us. We're here for you, and appreciate you joining me today, and I'll see you on the next Cameron's Corner.